양지 전몰소 능힘이 정도네 모놈 진보가 되었다. 바가로 당감산도 실물 톰바 특제잖아 기시험차를 내전으로 쓰는 연감선 저거 특지션을 일라 지금 변조자랑 소란데 공주 도반 법을 신지로
The answer past profound and wonderful Dharma is difficult to encounter in billions of aeons. I now see it here to receive and uphold it, avow to fathom the Tathagata's true meaning, to liberate all beings, thus generate the supreme bodhicitta. Let's begin our class on the Surangama Sutra. So far, we've covered about 42 pages out of 176 pages in my Tibetan version, that is, which is about 1/4 of it. A little bit more than 1/5 of the whole text, maybe about 1/4. We began this teaching back in 2019 on September the 2nd. It's almost 3 years, and we haven't really finished 1/4 of it. Of course, various things had happened throughout these years, which delayed the whole process, but I'm not so sure how long it's going to take us to finish it. At the beginning, I wanted to finish the teachings faster, so I wanted to cover more content as fast as possible, but it's really not that easy. At the glimpse of it, it seems it's quite easy. The eyes, ear, nose, and body and tongue, the earth, water, fire, wind, and so on and so forth. It seems easy, but whenever we really delve into the analysis, it's really not that easy at all. Previously, we've already covered on the 5 aggregates, the 6 entrances, and 12 Ayatanas and 18 Dhatus. We've already covered on all of them. Beginning from today, we're going to start the explanation on the 7 great elements, which includes the earth, water, fire, wind, space, and perception and consciousness, these 7. Ananda said to the Buddha, Ananda at this point started to speak. After the Buddha gave teachings on the 18 Dhatus, Ananda said to the Buddha, World-honored one, the thus come one has often spoken of the mixture and union of causes and conditions, saying that the transformation of everything in the world are created from the mixture and uniting of the 4 elements. Ananda said that, well, everything that happens, they are simply of mixture and union of causes and conditions. This is what the thus come one had often spoken of. The transformation of everything in this world, all the phenomena and the transformations of them are created from the mixing and uniting of the four elements. According to the Buddha, through various sutras, he states that the various things in our world, all phenomena, all the changes are simply the result and production of the causes and conditions, such as the 4 great elements. Let it be the mountains, rivers, and ground, or the houses and huts, and our eyes, ears, nose, tongue, our body. In fact, it cannot part from the 4 great elements. Without the 4 great elements, we won't be able to survive in this world. There's really no animate or inanimate world. That is why the Buddha often talks about how everything is simply everything is simply created from the mixture and uniting of the 4 elements. And then Ananda asks, why does the thus come one rejects causes and conditions and spontaneity as well? Previously, when we studied the 6 entrances, the 12 ayatanas, the 18 dhatus, at the summary part, the Buddha often talks about it. Therefore, it is not a production of causes and conditions, nor of spontaneity, right? So over here, Ananda asked the question, well, why does the thus come one rejects causes and conditions and spontaneity now? I do not know how to understand your meaning now, Ananda says. I really don't know how to understand your teaching. I don't understand what you mean. What is the secret meaning within that? Previously, you talked about how everything is simply the production of causes and conditions, and now you said it's not. Please be so compassionate as to instruct us living beings in the final meaning of the middle way in the Dharma, which are not idle theories. So could the Buddha please give us the teachings, give the sentient beings the teachings on the middle way, on the prajna paramita, on emptiness, on the most final meaning, on the most absolute meaning, that is without any elaborations. Ananda, though he studies the Theravada tradition, but he talks about, he's quite good at using middle way or the final meaning and not idle theory. He's very good at using those terms in his questions. So he uses the terms of a Mahayana. And then the world-honored one told Ananda, you have renounced the small vehicle dharmas of the sound hearers and those enlightened to conditions, and have resolved to diligently seek unsurpassed bodhi. The Buddha told Ananda, saying that, well, now you have already abandoned the Theravada, the small vehicle, the Hinayana ways of the Dharma. As we know that Ananda is a sound hearer from the Hinayana vehicle. But for some reason, you have developed more of an interest to the Mahayana teaching, and you have renounced the small vehicle dharmas. On top of that, you have resolved to diligently seek the unsurpassed bodhi. You have generated Mahayana aspiration. Because of that, I will now explain the foremost truth to you. I will explain the most supreme and profound and absolute teaching, the foremost teaching to you. The foremost Dharma teaching sometimes is explained as the absolute. But over here, the absolute refers to the Mahayana Dharma. The Buddha is about to expound the profound Dharma teaching of the Mahayana. Why do you still bind yourself up in the idle theories and false thoughts current among people of the world? The Buddha said that, why are you still bound by the conceptions and the elaborations of this world, which further fetters you? Since you have already abandoned the mind to the mind of the self-cherishing mind, and already made the aspiration of the supreme bodhi. Since you already made the aspiration of the Mahayana unsurpassed bodhi, but you are still fettered by all kinds of idle theories and false thoughts, such as causes and conditions. Ananda has lots of graspings towards causes and conditions. Whenever you ask questions, you would ask questions about the causes and conditions. conditions. Though that Ananda already made the aspiration to enter into the Dharma path of Mahayana at the beginning of the Surangama Sutra, if you remember.
那这个原因呢，就是佛陀也说说这个如虽多闻如所摇人真。
The Buddha continued to say that although you're very learned, you're like someone who can discuss medicines but cannot distinguish a real medicine when it is placed before you.
虽然是你是多闻第一，应该是这个光闻博学，
Ananda
非常了不起，这一点是没有
is
什么
well
说。
known as
可是呢，你这样的多闻呢，就是
Ananda is the foremost in
就是就像
the
大
Sangha
个比
as the
喻来
most
讲的话呢，
learned.
有一个人呢，就是他就索要就是很厉害的，就是他就讲各种各样东南西北的
And
这
then the
些
Buddha gives
药物
an
啊、配方
example,
啊、
just
治病
as
的
if
这
a
种
person who
药效啊
can
等等
talk about
他这样的事
medicine
就是头头是道，就是特别
very
道
well. He can talk about
可
all
是呢，
kinds of
真
theories
正
about
就是药
medicine. But
已经
whenever
显现在他
the
面前的时候
medicine,
呢，
the actual
他就不能
medicine
分
was
辨，
placed
他
in
智慧
front of
降
that person,
智慧
that
降
person
对
cannot
真正把这
distinguish
个药
whether
就是
that
各种
is
各
the
样的药，就是
medicine or
一
not.
大堆
He
放
can
在你
only
面前，
talk
你来
about the
认识一下，
theories, but
他只
cannot
是
really
讲，就是实际上
distinguish
从来
the
也是没有
actual
这个辩驳过
medicine.
去。这种人呢，就是我们实践当中呢，就是叫这个空谈家啊，就是
We
空谈家
have
的，就是就
a
讲的
whole
时候
bunch
呢，
of
就是
people
特
like that
特别
in
好，就是
our
但
time
实
as
际上
well,
呢，就是
and
要
we
做
call
的时
them
候呢，就
the
是不是实干
theorists.
的，就是应该是
They're not very
就是我们
practical.
有一种古人有一种说法叫做呢，讲的时候呢，什么，好像。
There's a Tibetan old saying I'm trying to remember, which describes this particular type of situation and this type of particular person, but I can't remember. I can only remember half of it.
他这样的就是，所以这个呢，就是应该是，就是光闻多学。其实我们很多人
Anyhow, there are people who are
可能
quite
是
learned,
确实是
just like many of
也
us.
有这样的
We're similar
可
to
能
Ananda.
毛病吧，就是尤其是一辈子都是像那个看布看木啊。
There are lots of Khenpos and Khenmos and the tutors. They're very good at giving teachings to the others, and it sounds very good. They're quite eloquent. But when it comes to the time for them to work on their own afflictions, in fact, since they had never placed those teachings into actual practice, they had never diligently practiced in meditation or worked with their afflictions. There's no practical experience of that. Therefore, they can only speak of it. In the Chinese saying, there's a particular term, it's called armchair strategist. So a person who can only talk about strategy but cannot really lead the armies. The story goes that there was a person who was quite eloquent in talking about the strategies. But if the person were to lead the army to defend the country, then he failed quite horribly. I think about 400,000 soldiers died under his leadership, and his country fell because of his strategies as well. It is something that we need to be cautious of. In Buddhism, we talk about that there are people who are very good at parroting the theories, but they're not very good at applying those teachings onto their own afflictions, onto their own, working with their own negative habitual tendencies. But there could be people, though lacking in those experiences in practice, they're very good at talking about all the absolute, all the emptiness, all the profound teachings. There are a group of you, of course, have very good wisdom, and whenever I get into more of the profound part of the Dharma teaching, I notice a group of you right away would wake up to it. And then there are a group of you who prefer the simple teachings. Whenever I joke about all the food and cooking and all the little chores of life, you get more interested in it. So people could be very different. Anyhow, whenever we talk about emptiness, when we talk about the Surangama Sutra, the we can notice that Ananda also has this particular tendency on grasping onto causes and conditions. And the Buddha over here, in the sutra, it says, the thus come one says that you are truly pitiful. It is exactly referring to the group of people who, though are learned but not practicing, not uphold those practice in their daily life. It is quite crucial for you to diligently practice the teachings rather than just listening to the teachings. Over here, the Buddha scolded Ananda. After scolding Ananda, Ananda didn't get revenges or feel quite defensive at all. Therefore, the Buddha said that listen attentively now as I explain this point in detail for you and also for those of the future who cultivate the great vehicle, so that you all can penetrate to the real appearances. The Buddha says that while listen carefully, though that you're quite pitiful, though that you're just very learned, but when it comes to the actual practice, the actual application of the practice, it gets difficult for you. I notice some of you are very good at listening to the teaching, very good at contemplating to the profundity of the Dharma. I notice a group of you are very good at analyzing the teachings without having to speak too much in language, but there are a group of you who during your after-class presentation, though spoke plenty, but the content is rather sometimes wrong. So the Buddha over here says that, well, since I noticed that it's quite a pity that you're learned, but you don't know how to penetrate into the actual teaching of the Dharma, therefore I'm going to explain this point in detail, so listen attentively. And this teaching is not just for you, it is the teaching also for those of the future generations who cultivate the great vehicle so that you can come to the full enlightenment. The Buddha not only gave the teachings to Ananda, he gave the teachings to all of us. After 2,500 years, the group of practitioners who vow to practice on the Mahayana path. Ananda was silent and awaited the Buddha's holy instruction. He was very respectful and waiting, standing there, waiting for the instructions given by the Buddha or going to be given by the Buddha. According to the Tibetan translation, it says that Ananda awaited respectively listening to the teaching. Look at Ananda. He's not defensive about being scolded at all, rather than some of you staffing at the various positions. Sometimes when you made a mistake, I would scold you, but after scolding you, you would feel wronged and don't want to work in those posts anymore. Look at Ananda. When the Buddha scolded Ananda a bit, he still attentively and carefully and attentively listening to the instructions given by the Buddha with great respect. According to the Mahaprajnaparamita Shastra, it says that the listener should listen to the Dharma teaching while gazing at the teacher with great respect, and then receive the Dharma teaching as if one were so thirsty but received the nectar at that moment of suffering from thirst. Wholeheartedly delve into the Dharma teachings given by the teacher with a heart and mind of great joy and bliss. At the time of listening to the Dharma, sometimes they may feel saddened, sometimes they may be delighted, sometimes maybe the combination of the previous two. This type of person who can truly delve into the Dharma with those mixed feelings are the proper vessels. When you are listening to the Dharma teachings, it is not necessary for you to sit far away from the Dharma throne. It is not a proper way of listening to the Dharma when you're dozing off or when you're distracted by doing other things. What is the proper way of listening to the Dharma is to listen attentively, wholeheartedly, and focus one-mindedly on the Dharma teaching. While following the Dharma voice of the teacher, we may then generate the mind of joy or suffering. All kinds of state of mind would switch. There are some kinds of changes to your mind that would be, if you follow the Dharma teachings, then your mind would be sometimes shocked and sometimes waved and changed. That kind of change is quite crucial. Then in the sutra it says that Ananda, according to what you said, the mixing and uniting of the four elements create the myriad transformations of everything in the world. The Buddha says that Ananda, as you said, that everything is created from the four elements throughout mixing and uniting. So all the changes and transformations of everything in the world were caused by that as well. But those are not the absolute truth. According to the Lankavatara Sutra, it says that the foolish beings in our world would distinguish the earth, water, fire, and wind as solidly existing moisture, warmth, or the dharmas that's changing, that's constantly wavering. However, all of those are simply just names. There is no truly existent entity to them. So the Buddha firstly gave the summary of the four great elements, and then he refutes the true existence of the element of earth. But at first the Buddha gave the summary, saying that yes, the four great elements would create the myriads of transformations of everything in the world. And then he continued to say that Ananda, if the nature of those elements does not mix and unite in substance, then they cannot combine with the other elements, just as empty space cannot combine with the forms. The Buddha over here used a simple analysis to briefly explain why the four great elements cannot be mixed and cannot be not mixed, cannot be combined with the others, or cannot not be combined. When we make the observation, the mixing and not mixing, neither of them can truly establish. Why is that? Over here, the Buddha says that if the nature of those elements does not mix and unite in substance, so within it, they cannot combine with the other elements. If the elements does not mix and unite in substance, then how could all the earth, water, fire, and wind combine with the other elements? It doesn't combine, just as empty space cannot combine with the other forms. Since empty space is without any obstruction, but the other forms are with obstruction, then how could the space that is unobstructed to be combined with the obstructed? For the same reason, the four great elements does not mix and unite in substance, or they cannot combine with the other elements. Then from the second point of view, assuming that they do mix and unite, they are then only in a process of transformation in which they depend on one another for existence from beginning to end. If you were to say that they do mix and unite, it is rather just a process. It is just a process of changes. there will be the production and extinction. Without any detailed observation, we say that it is with mix and they do mix and unite. In that way, they will have a beginning and an end, a birth and extinction. There will be a sense of continuous. So it says that in the course of transformation, they are produced and extinguished, being born and then dying, dying and then being born, in birth after birth, in death after death. The way a torch spun in a circle forms an unbroken wheel of flame. It is just like how there is a torch being spun in hand. It is continuously spinning without any rest. If you were to, throughout the spinning, if some of the fire were to take a rest and doesn't want to go, there's no such situation at all. And then the Buddha told Ananda, saying that the process is like water becoming ice and ice becoming water. It takes turns, just as how after spring there's summer, and after summer there's fall, and then there's winter. So the four great elements, our life also is no other than this kind of causes and conditions. There's birth and death and death and birth that continuously to rotate. According to the Great Jewel Heap Sutra, it says that all phenomena arise because of the compounded causes and conditions. But there is no self-entity attached to it. There is no character attached to any of those. This is quite important. Everything that appears in front of us, they are because of causes and conditions. As long as there is causes and conditions to form such appearance, then there is no self-entity to it. This is quite an important point to remember. That is why when we talk about the four great elements, we need to remember, especially when it comes to the teachings of four great elements in the Abhidharma, we know that each of the dharmas, everything has the elements of the four great elements. According to Abhidharma, it doesn't really talk about how the fire is continuously burning. Rather, fire has the quality of firm and gathering or dispersing or moving. In each of the Dharma, there are different qualities of force, different qualities of its functions. Therefore, when we talk about the four great elements, the combination of the four great elements, we would talk about the nature of the fire being hot and the nature of water being moist. And when we look at this cup or this computer, does it have any apparent heat or any apparent moisture? Obviously, it doesn't have those coarse qualities of such, but it does contain the certain of the qualities within it. For example, the qualities of fire and qualities of water, quality of emptiness, quality of space. Those are taught in the Abhidharma. Later, we're going to talk about the seven great elements. Currently, the Buddha stated a brief introduction on the four great elements out of the seven great elements. The four great elements has birth and death and death and birth. This is the appearance of it. This is the phenomena of the four great elements. In fact, our body also has such birth and death and death and birth, except that the continuum is not apparent. Such kind of changes is very subtle, but it is constantly changing. Not only our body, the place that we live, this world that we live in, this inanimate world, also has such kind of birth birth and death and birth also has such kind of subtle changes. That is because they are all correlated to the causes and conditions. They are bound by the causes and conditions. Now let's look at the 5 great elements, which is the earth, water, fire, wind, and space, the 5 great elements. Each of them are going to be detailedly explained. These 5 elements are very familiar to all of us. It is unlike things that we have complete no understanding of, such as a submarine, how to make a submarine, how to make nuclear weapons. We have no information on any of those. But when it comes to the earth, water, fire, and wind, and space, those are the things that we live with every single day. We understand what they are. We know what earth is, what water is, and what fire is. But have you ever looked and observed in detail? Now, the Buddha told Ananda, saying that consider now the nature of earth. Its coarse particles make up a great earth. Its fine particles make up motes of dust, down to and including motes of dust bordering up on emptiness. The Buddha over here asked Ananda to make the observation of the earth element. The earth element, as we know, that the coarse particles make up the great earth, the earth that we step on. And the fine particles make up the motes of dust, 1 mote of dust. And we can divide those fine motes of dust even further, just as how in the modern science we can divide the fine mote of dust into the molecular, the atom nucleus, and quarks. And then the Buddha said that their appearances is at the boundaries of form. They're very close to emptiness. Sometimes we call it the motes of dust that cannot be further divided. When we studied the Buddhist logic or the 400 verses, I believe this particular term is quite, you should be quite familiar with it. The Buddha said that to further refine again and again the earth, even if it's just a bowl, to cut the bowl into a few different pieces, to grind it into dust, and then to continuously refine it again and again until to the point where it is at the boundary of form. That is the finest mote of dust. The most finest. If one divides those fine mote of dust, their appearance is at the boundary of form. So that is at the foremost, the most extreme finest aspect of that dust, to the extent that it is at the boundary of form. Then divide those into 7 parts. According to Abhidharma or Gateway to Knowledge, we know that it's the 7 most extreme fine mote of dust is 1 fine mote of dust. I used to memorize this in the Gateway of Knowledge, in the verses where it says that out of the most finest motes of dust is called one mote of dust. The most finest mote of dust forms into an iron mote of dust, and then the 7 iron mote of dust then forms into a sheep dust, and then the rabbit dust, and then the cow dust, sunbeam dust, and then a louse egg before it turns into louse. So the louse egg, and then a louse, and then a barley grain, and then a finger width, and then eventually after it increases in size in 7 folds.
所以呢，我们说是最那个细微的，就是最后呢，就是变成微尘啊，就是变成微尘。
So the finest is this particle. The finest is this mote of dust in this particular translation. In each of the mote of dust, there is the extremely fine mote. It is made by 7 extremely fine mote of dust.
那这样的话呢，就是这个意思，就是说，我们再这样分的话呢，就是其实是这个最细微的呢，就是。
It means that if we were to divide it further and further until the finest, which is the bordering upon emptiness mote of dust. If we were to divide that further, it should be that emptiness can give rise to form. According to the ornament of Madhyamika in the particular way of analysis, through that text it talks about how we can make the analysis in the 6 ways. Or the 400 verses where it talks about through this particular way of making observation, then at the very end, the most finest particle, the most finest motes of dust can also give rise to be divided and become emptiness. According to a sutra, it says that if one were to make analysis to all the forms, to the extent of the most extreme fine motes of dust, you will see that it doesn't have any true existence, just like how there is no horns to rabbits. If we were to continuously to refine a form again and again, then we would look at the most finest mote of dust, and we would come to the conclusion that there is nothing that can be obtained from that. We really need this particular type of analysis in our Mahayana practice as well, or as Buddhists in general, we need to understand it. This particular teaching is not given only in Buddhist teachings, rather it is given in the quantum physics as well. For example, the teacher of Albert Einstein, Max Planck, he was the winner of Nobel Prize back in 1918. He said that by observing anything in this world to its extent, you will note you should get shocked. If you do not get shocked, then that means you do not understand quantum physics. So over here, this part, it is also through making analysis all the way from the coarse objects, that is the earth elements, and then all the way to the smallest motes of dust. You will notice that there is nothing that can be obtained. In the teaching of Ponzo Rinpoche on the manjushri, the peaceful manjushri practice, which is an Ati text, he talked about how to come to the understanding and realization of emptiness. He also made the analysis from all the way from coarse matters to the finest and then to emptiness. The Buddha here says that Ananda, if this mote of dust bordering upon emptiness is divided and become emptiness, then out of emptiness, it should be that emptiness can also give rise to form. According to entering the way of Madhyamika, it says that though everything is empty in nature, but out of emptiness, everything can be manifested. So you don't need to worry about if everything's empty, then there is nothing that can be appeared. That is not the case. In Chinese, there is a saying that create something out of nothingness. That is a very good particular expression, because everything that we have, all phenomena, is simply manifested out of emptiness, because the nature is empty. That is why everything can be manifested. That's why everything can be produced and created. If it is not empty, then there's no dharma that can be produced. If it is not empty in nature, then there is no abiding, there is no extinction, there is no birth, there is no changes at all. There's no opportunities for it. That is why the Buddha told Ananda, don't worry about everything being empty, because Ananda is, after all, a Theravada practitioner, so he probably would be a little bit worried, because according to Sabbhativada school, any school below the Chittamatra school, they would hold on to something being solidly existent. Therefore, these kind of practitioners would hold on to a finest particle that is solidly existent. Without such kind of particle that is solidly existent, then there is no root for the building of everything, according to those Sabbhativada schools. Now, the Buddha then continued to say that just now you asked if mixing and uniting doesn't bring about the transformation of everything in the world. The Buddha still remembers his question. Ananda thought that his question was very sharp. And the Buddha now addresses his question, saying that, well, since you state that everything produces from the combination of causes and conditions and ceases if the causes and conditions would cease. But now I would like you to make the observation and see if the uniting and mixing is existent or not. What is it that you mean by mixing and uniting? You should carefully consider how much emptiness mixes and unites to make a single mold of dust bordering upon emptiness. The Buddha is saying that, well, let me ask you a question. Since you're saying that there is the smallest unit that is the dust bordering upon emptiness. If this particular dust were to build phenomenon, build matter, then how many of these kinds of dust that you need to make form? If you're talking about mixing and uniting, you need to mix and unite with the others. Then how many of those spaces that you need to mix and unite? Since it makes no sense to say that dust bordering on emptiness is composed of a dust of bordering on emptiness. So this dust bordering on emptiness is composed of a dust bordering on emptiness. Then you're just saying that two spouses becomes a family. You're saying that this dust bordering on emptiness is composed of dust bordering on emptiness. How could you say that this is the finest dust? This is the dust that is bordering on emptiness, also is composed of dust bordering on emptiness. If they were to be mixed together, then you cannot say that it is the finest dust anymore, because it is composed of something else. Also, if it is mixed and united together, are there any gaps in between? Are they merged together? So you need to make further observation upon it. If this dust bordering on emptiness is composed of dust bordering on emptiness, then it is just like two beggars getting married, since both of these dust are bordering to become emptiness. This dust bordering on emptiness slowly and slowly could become emptiness. Then the Buddha says that, moreover, since most of dust bordering upon emptiness can be reduced to emptiness, of how many modes of such form at this must emptiness be composed? Since emptiness is so vast, how could this smallest form to become vast emptiness? How could these two be mixed together? Ananda couldn't answer that either. When these modes of form mass together, a mass of form does not make emptiness. When emptiness is massed together, a mass of emptiness does not make form. If you think this form can mix and unite with anything else, with any other matter, then this mix and unite means that everything is not empty, but this is definitely not existent. We say that form is emptiness, emptiness is form. So if you say that there is something that is truly existent as uniting and mixing, then it is definitely not empty. If you were to mix this particle with emptiness, then it is definitely not form either, because as we stated previously, if you were to see sunlight, you won't be able to see darkness. So for the same reason, if you were to mix this form with emptiness and say that this formed matter is because it is mixed with empty, then the form can never be formed, can never exist. Besides, although form can be divided, how can emptiness be massed together, be all combined together? Therefore, there is no combination. Ananda kept on thinking that there is something that is massed together, that is something that's combined together, the causes and conditions that is compounded together, then there is a production. That is Ananda's understanding, but the Buddha did not agree with it. What is combined together? Is it emptiness and form combined together? Is cause and condition combined together? How is it combined together? Does it have contact or does it not have contact? Does it relate to each other or not? Does it combine to each other at the same time or not at the same time? Does it combine together with form or without form? In fact, whenever we use this kinds of analysis through Madhyamika, you will be able to understand that there is no solid existence, or it is in fact not because of causes and conditions that it could be produced. But of course, whenever we are speaking of it in a conventional way, yes, we can say yes, because of causes and conditions, this and that happened. But that is before you make the detailed observation. You can say that it happens under the causes and conditions, just like a dream and like an illusion, because these are false. These are not absolute. When you make such observation with your wisdom, you will understand that it is true. What the Buddha stated is true. The so-called combination with the causes and conditions, the uniting and the mixing, especially when we look into each aspect of the mixing and uniting of the causes and conditions. If we were to use that method if we were to apply that method onto the observation of the element of earth, we would be able to see that how is it going to mix and unite with the others? How is it going to mix and unite with emptiness, with the fire, with wind, and so on. When we make such observation, we will be able to understand that these are simply just illusory. We talk about, though that we live in this world that is made by the four great elements and live in this body that is made by the four great elements and doing all the kinds of things that is related to the four great elements, but they are simply illusory. It is simply just like a dream. And then the Buddha continued to say that you simply do not know that in the treasury of the thus come one, the nature of form is true emptiness, and the nature of emptiness is the true form. The Buddha told Ananda, saying that, well, you don't listen enough to the Mahayana teaching. Otherwise, you would know that out of the treasury of the thus come one, out of this Tathagata, in fact, the form is emptiness and nature of emptiness is true form. Everything is simply just like a dream and like an illusion. The nature of the forms are empty, and such kind of emptiness is not a relative emptiness, rather it is the emptiness of nature. Everything would manifest like a dream, like an illusion. There is the unceasing appearance, but the nature is completely pure and all-pervasive. In the Tibetan translation, it is translated as the nature is luminous. I think it is a very good translation over here. In fact, in the Buddha nature, all of the phenomena, they are pure in nature. They are all pervasive in the Dharma Dhatu. There is no Dharma that is not pervasive. The nature is empty and nature is luminous, and the great compassion is all pervasive. This is taught in the Vajrayana as well, using such terms. And then the Buddha continued to say that pure at its origin, it pervades the Dharma realm. It accords with living beings' minds in response to their capacity to know. In fact, as different sentient beings have very different capacities, therefore they would perceive things in different ways. Some would perceive as pure, some would perceive those as impure. But that is based on their own karma, based on their past positive or negative dharma, karma that they've created. Therefore, there are the manifestations of suffering and or happiness. But the sentient beings do not know that. They're not aware of it, therefore they get confused. It is experienced to whatever extent is directed by the law of karma. Ignorant of this fact, people in the world are so deluded as to assign its origin to causes and conditions or to spontaneity, just as some of the non-Buddhist schools, they would say that it is spontaneity. These mistakes, which arise from the discrimination and reasoning process of the conscious mind, are nothing but the play of empty words which have no real meaning. The Buddha now states that, well, Ananda, though that you're not as bad as the non-Buddhist practitioners, but you kept on asking the questions, it is produced because of causes and conditions. But he's still better than the non-Buddhist practitioners. He's still better than people who would say that it is produced out of no causes conditions. It is better than those people who said that it is because of produced because so and so, or rely by creation theories and so on. Anyhow, those those ignorant people in this world, they kept on talking about how they are produced by causes and conditions, but that is simply because the ignorant sentient beings had not realized that the nature of the Buddha nature. Therefore, they kept on give different reasoning process and conscious mind to make further discriminations and conceptions. But those play of empty words which have no real meaning. According to Zen teaching, they often talk about as long as you speak of it, it is not the true meaning of it. According to a sutra, it says that the Tathagata do not argue with the world. The world would argue with the Tathagata because the Tathagatas would not argue since language is of no real meaning. The language that we use, in fact, they do not have any true meaning. They are simply established because of the delusion. What is truly seeing the world? What is truly seeing the truth? It is only a very few numbers of people in this world can see that. What can be expounded and explained through language are the conventional things. But those are not the truth that is devoid of the four elaborations, the four extremes and 8 elaborations. The moment that you speak of it, it is wrong. According to the Zen teachings, they also speak of this. The true experience of luminosity and emptiness, the indivisibility of the two, is completely inconceivable, just as a mute tasting the sweet candy. There are many different teachings according to Vajrayana and Tantrayana and Zen teaching and Mahayana. There are direct pointing out to the nature of your mind that is beyond all of those speech. That is why through those direct pointing out you would experience that enlightenment. And when you attain enlightenment, you would see this world is truly real. And then at that time you would say, ah la la. Let's stop here today.